In 1985, crooner Ricky Nelson's plane went down in a blaze. The senseless loss shook the world, but as details emerged, it got so much worse. The story of Ricky Nelson is one of fame, fortune, and tragedy. Born to be a celebrity, he became the world's first teen idol and rock and roll icon by the time he was 17. His rise to fame was meteoric, and his fall was just as fast. Ricky Nelson was born in the limelight. On May 8, 1940, Ricky came into the world as the second son of a successful celebrity family. Harriet and Ozzie Nelson were already established actors and singers of remarkable talent, and they set their expectations for Ricky high right from the start. But his early childhood wasn't all glamorous. Ricky was a sickly and shy child. He suffered from severe asthma and was thin and unwell in his early years. Often described as shy, mysterious, and introspective as a child, this is hardly the start you'd expect from a world-renowned teen idol. But the spotlight called to him, and he had a lightning-quick path to stardom. Ricky soon joined his parents' sitcom, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, where he and his older brother David played fictional versions of themselves. Success was instant. The show first became a film, where Ricky got to work alongside Rock Hudson, and then a television series. But all of this fame came with a dark side. Ricky's stage presence was evident from the start. On The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, the young boy took to ad-libbing and chewing the scenery like a miniature Jerry Lewis to get spontaneous laughs from the studio audience. The thing is, his father Ozzie hated it, once snapping at him saying, "Son, there is no such thing as a child comedian." But that wasn't the only way Ozzie Nelson exerted his control. With the massive success of Ozzie and Harriet, Ricky was swimming in money at a time when most kids his age were counting their pennies. Both David and Ricky were earning a massive $500 a week, which was more than the average American lawyer made at that time. Not that his father let him see that money. Instead, Ozzie squirreled it away in a savings fund and only doled out a meager allowance to his sons to stop them from being spoiled. On paper, it was a good idea. In practice, it was the beginning of lifelong problems for Ricky. Ozzie and Harriet became one of the longest-running sitcoms in American history, in large part due to Ricky. But behind the scenes, it was falling apart. With his massive success but pitiful allowance, Ricky was becoming hugely removed from both the life of a star and the life of a normal child. At school, Ricky became a known troublemaker and slacker. In one typing class where he received a D grade, he threw spitballs and made voices behind the teacher's back. He also flunked English for always being late on the very few days that he bothered to show up. Then again, it was around this time that Ricky found his true calling, the one that would cement his legacy forever. Ricky wasn't only an incredible child actor. In his early teen years, he also developed another obsession. He learned the guitar and the drums, developing a real knack for music. Ricky was captivated by Elvis Presley in particular, and rock and roll in general, which had become a rallying cry for rebellion against 1950s expectations. And Ricky sure did rebel. Ricky had grown up under his father's thumb, and now there was a musical revolution sweeping the nation. He responded with a scandalous new look. His teenage rock rebellion took the form of sideburns, slick back hair, and even an attempt to tattoo himself. What else comes with fame besides posh lifestyles and piles of cash? Admirers and romance. Ricky's teenage years were full of young love and brief romances with co-stars, fans, and other celebrities in his age group. Ricky obviously didn't hate the attention that his celebrity brought him, and he started very early. While working on the set of Ozzie and Harriet, a teenage Ricky fell head over heels for the actress playing his TV girlfriend, Marianne Gaba. It was by all accounts brief, and they were apparently too young to enter a serious relationship. What they did get up to, though, was steamy. Ricky once confessed that they'd make out for hours. The parade of girls wouldn't stop at Marianne, but this is where Ricky's troubles really started. Ricky's parents expected nothing less than perfection from their son, and they were determined to make him the next superstar. So when a steady stream of would-be girlfriends came into Ricky's life, the Nelsons were quick to put their feet down. They thought girls would only distract him from his career, not to mention that none of them were good enough for their boy. If they had it their way, Ricky wouldn't date. Period. Little did they know, it was a girl who kickstarted his career as a musician. One day, Ricky was out on a date with a girl who, like him, was also a massive Elvis Presley fan. It was then that Ricky made a fateful decision. Despite the fact that he had no record contract to speak of, Ricky boasted to the girl, trying to impress her, that he was going to make a record just like their hero Elvis. But before he could even start, a horrific accident almost took it all away. When he was 16, Ricky's parents bought him a Porsche as a gift. Apparently, Ozzy had relaxed his no spoiled kids rule. Cars were so exclusive in the 1950s that no dealer even existed in California. Instead, they had to be custom built and then shipped 6 months after ordering. But Ricky was about to prove why maybe 16-year-olds shouldn't have nice cars. A couple of months into his ownership of the Porsche, Ricky and his friend, Forrest Stewart, took it out for a spin to a theater to see the rock and roll movie The Girl Can't Help It, starring Jane Mansfield. After showing off the Porsche to some girls, the pair started to drive down Sunset Boulevard. But this is when it all went so wrong. While on Sunset Boulevard, Ricky approached a straightaway and decided to see what his Porsche could really do, despite the fact that he and his friends hadn't bothered to put on seatbelts. Soon, Ricky was going 120 miles down the road, with Stewart begging him to slow down. But the moment the plea escaped his lips, disaster struck. As the pair careened down the street, the car reached a section of the road where sprinkler systems had flooded the pavement. Panicked, Ricky slammed on the brakes, first spinning the car, and then making it roll a breathless 8 or 9 times, ripping the tires off the car in the process. When the car finally came to a halt, everything was not okay. Although Forrest Stewart felt miraculously unharmed, he looked over to Ricky and watched a horror show. The star was screaming about his leg, and when ambulances arrived on the scene, they immediately took the pair to the hospital. As it turned out, they both had suffered cracked pelvises in the massive crash and were lucky to be alive. No one knew at the time, but this was tragic foreshadowing. Ricky's father Ozzy might have been annoyed at his son's rebellion and terrified at his subsequent crash, but he also knew Ricky had a future in music, and he knew a moneymaker when he saw one. He threw himself completely behind Ricky's burgeoning singing career, despite Ricky not wanting him to interfere. Still, given what came next, no one could say it didn't pay off. With his industry connections, Ozzy eventually set Ricky up with Verve Records, who were looking for a young person with a pre-existing fan base and passable singing talents. After Ozzy and Harriet, Ricky thought he had both. They signed him up to record 3 songs, including I'm Walkin', but it started to go wrong almost immediately. Given Ricky's obsession with rock and roll, his entertainment roots, and his ambition to become a singer, Verve Records had some hope that their new star had a set of pipes. But they were sorely disappointed. Although Ricky had some raw talent, his recordings would often go off the rails if the songs required too much breath control, had a wide range of notes, or simply contained certain words Ricky had trouble singing. As one executive put it, he was not a very accomplished singer. There wasn't even much of a voice. In the end, though, this hardly mattered because his father Ozzy had another brilliant idea. By March 1957, Ricky Nelson's first professional recordings were up and ready to go. Then came one of the smartest marketing plans of the 1950s. Ozzy decided to air Ricky's first live performance on the family TV show Ozzy and Harriet ahead of the release of I'm Walkin' as a single. It was not an immediate success. In truth, there was nothing live about Ricky's performance at all, as the young actor lip-synced all of his lines from I'm Walkin'. But more than that, to anyone who knew him, it was an extremely awkward showing. According to Ricky's brother David, this was a very embarrassed version of the song because Ricky did not quite know what to do with himself. When Ricky finally got through the piece, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They likely hoped the performance wouldn't do too much damage to his career, but absolutely no one predicted its true impact. Just after this episode aired, Ricky started hustling, doing an unpaid performance of Blue Moon of Kentucky at a local high school assembly. It was typical early career grunt work, which is what made the next development so stunning. A mob of teenage girls, having apparently caught and approved of the latest Ozzy and Harriet installment, greeted him at the assembly with screams, cries, and gasps. If it wasn't clear to him what was going on, it soon would be. As it turned out, Ricky Nelson had become almost literally an overnight sensation. Ozzy and Harriet had an audience of millions, and the fan mail soon came through in a steady avalanche. All while the phone never stopped ringing. More groups of adoring teen girls would gather at the studio gate just to catch a glimpse of Ricky. And this was just the beginning. It's hard to overstate the mania around Ricky Nelson at the time. Not only did I'm Walkin' and A Teenage Romance rocket to near the top of the charts, but the child actor's success also coined a new term. Teen idol was invented specifically to describe Ricky Nelson. Yet, complications were on the way. Despite the mobs of adoring fans that followed him wherever he went, Ricky had eyes for only one girl, fellow singer Lori Collins. This was actually pretty dicey, considering Ricky was nearly 18 years old at the time, while Collins was just 15 years old. But that didn't mean she didn't hold her own against him. In fact, she changed his life. Despite Collins' young age, she too had been through the entertainment ringer already, having started alongside her brother as the Collins kids since she was just a child. Of course, this gave her common ground with Ricky, but it also gave her huge connections and seasoned skills that quickly proved very useful to him. In between introducing Ricky to country heavyweights like Johnny Cash and Tex Ritter, Collins also helped co-write their first song, My Gal, but unfortunately they were doomed from the start. Ricky knew a good thing when he saw it, and fell madly in love with Lori Collins before long. The two teens were so devoted, they even began to talk about marriage with each other, which is right about when Ricky's mother Harriet, still terrified of her son straying from his path to stardom, stuck her nose in and yet again shut that kind of talk down immediately. And to be fair, Ricky was about to achieve an enormous career milestone. In October 1957, Ricky officially released his first album, aptly named Ricky. The following months were unbelievable. It reached #1 on the charts before the end of the year, but that wasn't even the best part. For a brief shining moment, Ricky even surpassed his idol Elvis. Between 1958 and 1959, Ricky had 12 hits on the charts. Elvis only had 11. Ricky was flying high, and with fame came terrifying pitfalls. While the masses of fans, fan clubs, and fan mail must have been a massive ego boost for Ricky at first, it all turned sour. At one event, 6 girls mobbed Ricky, threw themselves under his car, then begged him to run them over. Yet, Ricky's fame was about to get an even bigger boost. With Ricky Nelson fever sweeping the nation, Hollywood cast him in a big-budget western. Starring alongside Dean Martin and typecast cowboy John Wayne, Rio Bravo was a massive hit. A lot of that was because of Ricky's incredible star power, and director Howard Hawks gave him several singing scenes in the film. Hopefully, Ricky enjoyed it because it was about to be the height of his career. A downfall was coming. By the early 1960s, an invasion from across the pond quickly displaced American rock and roll. It was none other than the Fab Four that led the British invasion, the Beatles. Not even Elvis could compete with their appeal, and Ricky's seemingly untouchable star power started to quickly fade. To keep it alive, he came up with a desperate plan. What's in a name? Well, to Ricky Nelson, everything. In a bid to shed his teenage idol's squeaky clean, all-American image, on his 21st birthday he changed his recording name to Rick Nelson. But it was largely a swing and a miss. He would never again achieve the height of success that he had experienced in the late 1950s, and personal issues were on the horizon too. It was at this time that Ricky fell for a gorgeous young woman named Chris Harmon. She was the daughter of an actress mother and a famous football star father. Harmon was actually a friend of the family, and at long last, Ricky's hard-to-please parents approved of his girlfriend. Ricky and Chris were alike in so many different ways, and it seemed like destiny had brought them together. Both of them were secretly quiet and introverted, both grew up firmly in the glare of the limelight, and both had overbearing and controlling parents who wanted to micromanage their lives. It's no surprise things escalated so quickly, maybe a little too quickly. In 1963, Chris found herself pregnant. It turned into a stress nightmare. With her conservative parents, there was now no question that her and Ricky would marry, lest Ricky face the wrath of the Harmons. So on April 20th of that year, Ricky tied the knot in what he himself described as a shotgun wedding. What should have been a fairy tale marriage was more of a patch job. It was a signal of things to come for the couple. Ricky and Chris would go on to have 4 children together, but having more mouths to feed didn't help Ricky's faltering career. More determined than ever, Ricky started a comeback tour in the 1970s, hoping to find a new audience with new material. It went about as badly as it could. While performing in Madison Square Garden, the audience loudly booed him. It was perhaps related to police action in the crowd, or maybe disappointment from the audience. Either way, it left him feeling enraged. But this fury produced one last glimmer of success. Ricky channeled the disgust he felt after the Madison Square Garden's concert into writing a new song. The famous Garden Party, with lyrics like, "You can't please everyone, so you gotta please yourself." It was Ricky's last big hit. The dream of the world's first teen idol had finally withered away. And in the meantime, his private life imploded. In 1975, Ricky's relationship with Chris was far from harmonious, and it began to groan under the increasing pressure of Ricky's dying career. Harmon, who had spent extravagantly since the day they married, now wanted Ricky to both be at home more and somehow come up with mountains of money to support her lavish lifestyle. Torn between two impossible choices, Ricky just kept constantly touring in hopes to keep his wife happy. But before long, it reached a harrowing boiling point. Disappointed in her life and lonely at home, Chris Harmon turned increasingly more towards drinking to ease her sorrows. It came to a heartbreaking end. Eventually, Chris became an alcoholic and began to leave her children in the care of the household staff. At this point, the marriage was beyond saving. They filed for divorce in 1977, but their bitter entanglement was far from over. Divorce is never a pleasant thing, but divorce in the public eye must be so much worse. For Ricky and Chris, the tabloids were ruthless, plastering rumors and stories of the family's squabbles all over the headlines. That wasn't all. After he paid the lawyers and the split became official in 1982, Ricky was practically bankrupt. Perhaps this is what led him to some very questionable decisions. In 1980, Ricky's love life was in shambles, and his rebounds were even more ruinous. Ricky met the young Georgianne Crew while touring and ended up with her in bed. It came back to haunt him months later. Crew discovered she was pregnant. She tried to reconnect with Ricky to tell him the news, but the reaction was nothing short of appalling.
For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factinate member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details.
Unfortunately, Crew never even got to see Ricky to tell him the news. One of his people headed her off at the pass, stating, "Ricky won't ever want to see that child." Countless of Crew's other attempts failed too, and Crew had her son Eric alone. But then she took matters into her own hands. When her son Eric was 6 months old, Crew carted the boy to one of Ricky's concerts. She then sat herself down right in the front row. According to her, the whole time he was performing, Ricky was looking at Eric. She didn't stop there. She started legal proceedings soon after. Once blood tests confirmed the boy was Ricky's, support payments quickly followed. He was basically penniless. His career was in the gutter, and the stink of a messy public divorce still lingered. But then he met Helen Blair, a stunning model and exotic animal trainer in Las Vegas. It was a whirlwind romance. As was typical for Ricky, within months Blair was touring with him, and a short time later she had moved into his house. Ricky seemed finally ready to settle down, but old demons continued to haunt him. Blair quickly became the center of Ricky's life. Beyond being his lover, she became his personal assistant and fan club liaison, but Ricky's family interfered with his relationship once again, claiming that Blair wasn't good enough for him. They were so insistent, Ricky even dropped plans of marrying her, in part to keep them off his back. Even as a washed-up star, Ricky could never truly forget or give up the luxuries of the high life. In fact, even though he was afraid of flying, he refused to travel with the tour bus for his 1985 tour. So, setting aside his fear, he forked out a ton of cash for his own private plane. Though, given his tight budget, it was secondhand, having once belonged to Jerry Lee Lewis. Like Ricky Nelson himself, the plane had seen better days and was riddled with mechanical problems. The purchase was a decision with dire consequences. The 1985 tour got off to a shaky start for Ricky and his band, mainly because Ricky's plane could never seem to work. It quickly turned terrifying. At one point, they couldn't get the engine to start and had to push the craft off the runway. At another, Ricky had to cancel one of his appearances because the plane was malfunctioning again. Still, Ricky kept pushing, kept touring, and kept trying to make more money. This would be his end. On New Year's Eve, 1985, Ricky's careless purchase finally caught up with him. After taking off from Guntersville, Alabama, and intending to go to a New Year's Eve party in Dallas, Texas, the crew experienced mechanical difficulties in the air and, after most probably catching fire, crash-landed just north of their destination. When the smoke cleared, the truth was almost unbearable. The teenage car crash that Ricky had caused had nothing on this accident. Besides catching fire, the plane hit several trees on the way down, and the damage was brutal. Only 2 passengers, the pilot and co-pilot, survived. Ricky, his girlfriend Helen Blair, and all of his bandmates and crew perished, including former Steppenwolf band member Andy Chapin. The world's first teen idol died in the most tragic of circumstances, and there was a cruel twist. Ricky's family proved their hatred for Helen Blair tenfold after her death. When the Blair family requested that they bury their daughter alongside Ricky, Ricky's mom declined outright. At the funeral, which had over 700 fans and multiple celebrity mourners in attendance, no one even mentioned Blair's name. The world mourned the death of one of its great musicians for many years after, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted Ricky in 1987. It was in recognition of his trailblazing life, his contributions to early rock and roll music, and no doubt his untimely death. Radio star, TV star, movie star, and rock star, he was so much to so many people. If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want to say in who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.